We few, we happy few, we band of brothers, for he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother.
December 26th, 1942. Well, Christmas has come and gone. I really can't say just another year and another Christmas. This is one I won't likely forget for the rest of my life.
My Uncle Bud Kelly in Rye, New York, whom I hadn't had really close contact with for a number of years, sent them to me in a shoebox. I hadn't known they were coming. I wasn't prepared for them to be here, but a shoebox shows up. Inside the shoebox were stacks and stacks of letters with a little note from my uncle saying, "I thought you might find this interesting."
Joseph V. Maloney was the son of Irish immigrants brought up in Rye, New York. Like millions of other American boys, the 27-year-old signed up to fight for his country following the attack on Pearl Harbor.
My dad died when I was 5 years old. And so one of the things about my relationship with my father is, of course, there's the hazy memories of a child toward his dad at that time. But the other part of it is that there was a certain lore and a certain legend about my dad relative to being a Marine in the Pacific.
Guadalcanal was strategically vital to the history of the United States and to the history of World War II. This military campaign was fought between August 7, 1942 and February 9, 1943, on and around the island of Guadalcanal in the Pacific Theater. It was the first major offensive by Allied forces against the Empire of Japan. The Japanese had recently lost a naval battle at Midway, but were still on the offensive. Private First Class Marine Joe Maloney was not prepared for what lay ahead of him.
When that airfield was discovered, the Marines said, we're going to have to deal with this. General Vandegrift, who was the first general in charge of the 1st Marine Division, talked to Admiral King, who was the head of all naval operations at the Pentagon. He said, "I can have a Marine division ready to go in 6 months." And King said, "You have 2. You have 2 months. And you're going to take this island and you're going to take that airfield."
There were a number of boys from Rye, New York who signed up for the Marines, and there were a number of boys from Rye, New York who ended up on Guadalcanal, an island that was located in a way that the Japanese forces were intent on building an airstrip. This unseasoned Marine division was trained and organized and sent into this place no one had heard of. The Japanese were of the opinion that the Americans were not a serious threat.
What ended up happening, they did chase away all of the transports. They couldn't land any troops because they wanted to protect their ships. The Japanese knew that their industrial capacities were not to our levels. They wanted to protect their assets and they didn't want to risk them. The Marines that evening saw all of this fireworks out on the ocean, and I didn't know what happened. When the sun came up, there was flotsam and jetsam and no American ships, no American transports, no equipment. A third of the landing party had disappeared, not to be sunk, but they left. The Marines ended up on Guadalcanal without adequate food, without adequate weapons, without adequate ammunition, and without adequate machines in order to build the airstrip.
The Japanese realized the Americans were here to stay, and they began to develop a strategy to build a large military force. On September 7th, Kawaguchi issued his attack plan to rout and annihilate the enemy in the vicinity of the Guadalcanal Island airfield. Kawaguchi's attack plan called for his forces split into 3 divisions to approach the Lunga perimeter inland, pushing in with a surprise night attack.
Now, when the Japanese said annihilate, it was annihilate. It wasn't like chase them, break them, and capture them. It wasn't to eliminate them as a fighting force. It was to kill all of them. So that was the nature of what happened in that battle on the night of 11 September.
September 28th, 1942. Hello, Mom and Pop. I want to let you know that I'm still all right, still doing business at the same old stand.
Now I had first-hand information, first-hand storytelling in my father's own handwriting on paper that was, inside the swamps, that was, inside that same air. Some of it was on captured Japanese stock.
Old Glory still flies on top of the hill about 600 yards from me. It looks very reassuring, and it will still be there at the end of all this trouble. The Marines have done some remarkably good work here, and many of them are up for citations. They are well deserved, and I hope they receive them. I met young Red Coughlin yesterday for the first time. He looks kind of thin, but not bad. He had just come off the front lines. I hadn't heard anything about him since that first letter I had about him in New River in May. I've heard that our mail is due to be delivered in a few days. I told you that I only had 3 letters since May, and 1 from you. I am kind of eager for some news from home. Tell me all about what is going on around the town.
It was a visit. It was an arrival. It was his presence. There was something beyond photographs. There was a person speaking to me. On the other hand, it was from an older perspective. It was the vision of that person that I would have of somebody who was living through things such as all he wanted to hear were letters from home. There was a pattern of phrases, which is, I'm just writing to let you know I'm okay. He was never allowed to tell his story. They would edit everything.
I would like to give you a blow-by-blow description of what went on and is going on here. But the man says no can do, and that means no can do. How are the kids? I sure miss them. I'll bet Butch is a little devil now. Say hello to Becky and tell her to take good care of them because I want them to look good when I come home to see them.
And so what I was able to see from an older man's perspective was the mind and the heart of somebody who was lost in an environment that was a nightmare. And all he wanted to let people know, and possibly just reaffirm to himself, I'm still alive. That was a theme through all of these letters.
Despite the U.S. victory off Cape Esperance, the Japanese advanced forward for preparations for their large offensive targeted for later in October. On October 13th, a convoy comprising 6 cargo ships with 8 destroyers departed the Shortland Islands for Guadalcanal. The convoy carried 4,500 troops from the 16th and 230th Infantry Regiments, some Naval Marines, 2 batteries of heavy artillery, and 1 company of tanks. To protect the approaching convoy from attack, Yamamoto sent 2 battleships to bombard Henderson Field.
We had built up Henderson Airfield to the point that it had more than enough fighter bombers and fighters to chase the Japanese, sink their ships, and as far out as 250 miles from where the Marines were. So the Japanese knew that in the daytime there wasn't much that they could do. They had to do things at night. What happened then is that the Japanese intended to completely shut down Henderson Field with 1,000 high explosive rounds, each weighing 1,500 pounds. If they could do that, there's no way that the Americans could chase any of their ships away in daylight hours. That meant they could come down and land either a regiment or a division, which was what they were going to do to break the American hold on Henderson Field. Virtually all of the planes were destroyed, but they did have surviving planes. They went into the gas tanks of those that hadn't been burned. They emptied the gas, because all of the gasoline reserves were burned as well, were destroyed as well. The weapons were destroyed, the armaments were destroyed, the airfield was destroyed, all of the planes were destroyed. We were defenseless. What they figured out then is they put out a call. They said, we need airplanes, and we need armament, and we need fuel. And everyone turned everything to get that there under the orders of the President of the United States.
Hello, Mom and Pop. About another week has gone since I wrote you last, and a lot has happened here since then. Of course, not a thing I can tell you, but you will know that I am still safe. You can read the details in the paper. I'm not writing many other letters to other people, so when you see them, let them know that I am all right. Especially when you write to Sally and Harry. Tell them I was asking for them. They've been awfully good to me since I've been in the service. I certainly ache for news from home. Can't you people write a good, newsy letter a couple of times a week? Those you have written seem to be notes. Tell me all the things that are happening with the kids and everything else.
Whatever happened then is they were able to put stuff together. They got that airfield back in order that day. So they ended up chasing down the Japanese when the Japanese didn't think that was going to happen. But the horror of that night was written about by my dad in a letter.
Things here could be worse, but at least I'm still alive. We have hopes that things will quiet down here before long. The men are holding up well, but all wish it was over and we were home. And how. I am looking forward to having a drink at Pelly's. Maybe I can take Mom down there with me. That will be the day. If you see Mary F., say hello if she hasn't received my letters. Tell Jim and Pete to keep the home fires burning. And Pop, have a drink at Pelly's for me. I can only write on one side of the paper, and this is all I have now. Goodbye for now, and I will write again soon. Still no mail from home. Love to all, Joe.
What's happening on Guadalcanal?
It looks as though Guadalcanal were to become a historic name. Ever since the U.S. Marines landed on this jungle-clad island in the Southern Solomons Group early last August, it has been singled out for special attention by our enemies.
In the United States, the story of Guadalcanal had become so large in terms of contemporary news articles and radio articles, it became a big subject. In October of 1942, it appeared that we were going to not survive, our Marines would not survive there, that we were going to have a major strategic loss and a catastrophic loss. The New York Times wrote almost a eulogy stating that our Marines have done some things that will be remembered all through history. It was the kind of thing you talk about when you've lost a major battle. The American President, Roosevelt, said that's not going to happen. He said, you're going to find ammunition from wherever you can find it. We will not lose Guadalcanal. So it was a decision. Keeping Guadalcanal and winning at Guadalcanal was demanded at the highest level of our government. The same was taking place with the Japanese government. At the highest end, Guadalcanal had become something so significant for both civilizations that neither one was going to lose. That's the story, ultimately, of Guadalcanal. My father died when he was 39 years old. He died 10 years after he got back from the Pacific. He died of the effects of the illnesses that he and other Marines suffered on Guadalcanal. They were never given adequate medicine. They were never taken off the line until there was evidence that they had a temperature of 103. If you know anything about malaria, it spikes and it drops and it spikes and it drops. When it spikes, you have a temperature of 103. When it drops, you don't. If they don't take your temperature when you're at 103, you stay on the line. So they were being poisoned by terrible jungle illnesses. It destroyed many of his organs, certainly his liver, because of the malaria, and it certainly hastened his death. He had written a letter about Christmas. He wrote it the day after Christmas.
December 26, 1942. Dear Mom and Pop and everyone. Well, Christmas has come and gone. I really can't say just another year and another Christmas. This is one I won't likely forget for the rest of my life.
The clarity that was inside his letter, which had to do with a sense of peacefulness, is that he wasn't broken. He still saw beauty. You know, he still had a sentimental relationship with Christmas Eve. He still had memories of his church. He still went to midnight mass. Whatever it was, and it may have been almost emblematic of those men, is that they didn't just survive, they stood tall. But still, on Christmas Eve, there was a sweetness to it.
I went to confession Christmas Eve and to communion at midnight mass. The chaplain's tent was not as elaborate as the church back home, but its simplicity lent a very peaceful atmosphere. Overhead in the tent were small electric Christmas tree lights with tinsel and roping around the crossbeams. There was a great deal of men who couldn't naturally get inside. Throughout this overflow, men held candles here and there during Mass. It was a very impressive sight when you consider the location and the circumstances. There was even a choir that sang Christmas carols during Mass. I had a letter from Helen saying you are getting my mail and that Tom got the money I sent him. I expect I should get an answer from him pretty soon. I now have about $360 coming to me, and when I get someplace where I can get paid, I will send you some money. Jim can save a few dollars for me and use the rest. I guess you can use it now. Well, that's all for now. I will write again soon. Love to all, Joe.